Right. Hello and welcome to the Black Belt in Thinking webinar. Right, I will share the video. So today I have with me James Powell. James, who has an absolute expert in the kind of things we're looking at on this webinar. So the purpose of the webinar is to give you, the viewer, something tangible to take away. Come and learn something that you can actually use to think better while you go about your life. I'm Peter Cronin, host of the webinar, of course, and lead presenter of the Black Belt in Thinking. And James is great for this presentation we have today, or this interview, because he spent so long around logical thinking tools. In fact, first applying them back in the early 90s, James, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, to a software company and having a massive impact there, taking that, moving it into a dedicated business, implementing these thinking techniques along with other zero constraints technologies, and then going back and using these thinking techniques with a founder and CEO and a senior management team to take another software company to IPO and great successes. So without any more pomp and circumstance, I'll welcome James Powell.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the intro.
Cool. All right. So, James, we're here to talk about Druids. So, do you want to give us the elevator pitch for what is a Druid and why should we be excited?
Sure. The elevator pitch, if we're to keep it very short, is that you know how many times in life and in business you find yourself on the horns of a dilemma where sometimes you choose one option and sometimes you choose the other, and either way you just seem to end up back where you started. That's the very short version. A slightly longer version is an observation that I had working late 90s with in the consulting business, was that we'd visit a company and, you know, you start the dialogue about what are your issues, what's going on in the business, and you'd find that one functional area would start to talk about a problem, and fairly quickly a representative of a different functional area would create a counterpoint. So, you know, it might be, for example, you know, finance is saying that, well, we need to get inventories down. Whereas the sales manager immediately goes, whoa, hang on. No. I mean, you know, we got serious issues with stock availability. You can't just be driving inventory down willy-nilly. And so we would see this, I suppose, this conversational tennis match going on between the managers. So as a consulting group, you're sitting there and you're listening to this back and forth, and it's very tempting to perhaps think your job is to somehow leap in and adjudicate. And I found I got a lot more insight by not just watching, but perhaps even stirring up these looping conversations to try and get a lot more clarity on what was going on. And I called it Magic Druids because it felt like perhaps watching a movie with you know, the magicians, or like Harry Potter or Star Wars, you know, Yoda versus Count Dooku or whatever, where the characters have got some sort of mystic power and they're trying to use the force of their will to impose the obviousness of their argument on the other side. And so you would see these managers going to war on each other like magic druids, and they would even, you know, cast spells. They'd be getting animated and they'd get madder and madder, and then they'd invoke these one-liners that were like magic phrases, and use buzz terms like stock outs, you know, and so on. And so it was as though somehow just the sheer, if you could just shout these words loud enough, you could somehow win the war. And like what often happens in movies is a standoff, but the two sides, you know, the red energy blasts out of the one side and the blue energy blasts out of the other, and they meet in the middle and it's a big cascade, and then at the end of it they all run out of gas and just stare at each other and go, well, that was spectacularly ineffective. And so watching warring druids it sort of tickled me as an analogy for what I was seeing in business. And rather than think that was somehow a problem in and of itself, it occurred to me that was indicative of a deeper issue. And the deeper issue is that any business survives out of being stable in the face of outside forces, or in fact, any entity that's trying to survive, a living cell, also survives by creating stability internally relative to outside forces. And the part of the stability, if you think about, maintaining your blood chemistry or a cell maintaining its internal biochemical state, is that it's all buffered against the environment. So it doesn't matter what the environment throws at the system buffers out that shock. And so this stability that we see in this argument, these unwinnable fights, and yet nevertheless they continue to be fights. These are a side effect, and they're a powerful and useful side effect of stability. So in order for a business to survive, it has to have stability. And in order to have stability, it has to have balancing and competing forces. In order to have balancing and competing forces, it has to have unwinnable fights in it. So this is not, the druids as such, so-called druids, are not the problem. They tell you why the system is so stable, and they speak to the strengths of that system and how the system stays in the state that it's in. So that's the very short version, the medium version, and the long version.
Yeah, nice. So obviously you started to realize the fact the druids was there. However, and I can ask this question because I was also there at this switching point. What was the switch between it being the way you did things, I guess the realization of how you saw things, and turning it into a functional tool?
Yes, I remember we were in Germany, I think, or we were on the way. I think we'd landed at the airport in Germany, you and I. We were in the airport hotel or something, and I had one of those blinding flash of the obvious, holy crap moments. And it came about because we were looking for a way to rapidly complete the diagnostic toolbox set from the Black Belt in Thinking course that you were running in Germany. And the challenge of why on earth does it take so long to do a deep dive cause and effect map of a business system and then come up with a breakthrough. Now, when I say so long, I mean, we might be solving intractable systems that have been in a dire state for a decade, and we're seeking to solve it in a week. But what I was finding was that as I got more and more fluent with recognizing these warring patterns, the need for me to spend that week had diminished down and down and down and down and down to where pattern recognition of the set of conflicts was enough for me to, I'm not going to say sort of magically solve things, but enough for me to have a very clear landscape of what makes the business powerful and stable. And so to be able to take that landscape and work rapidly with the participants in the system, and people would say things like, you've only been here 15 minutes. It feels like you've been having these fights with us for the last 30 years. It feels like you've been sitting on our board meetings. It feels like you've been in our management dialogues. How on earth do you absorb the usness of things so quickly? And the answer is these patterns, you see. So here we are going to Germany to teach the Black Belt Thinking course, and I'm thinking, why? These are participants in the system that they're diagnosing. How on earth does it take them 5 days or 4 days, from Friday afternoon really to Monday night, if I remember correctly, to sort of definitively state, right, these are the core conflicts that we need to disrupt in order to change our reality. And you and I were asking the question, you know, why does it take from Friday afternoon to Monday night when I can do it in 3 hours on a business I've never met before? And fortunately, you and I were off to visit, I won't name the business, but we were off to visit a German company at the time. And I said, well, I'll just do what I do, take notes, you know, and take photos and record me. And let's afterwards take a look at it. And what on earth was he up to in that meeting? Like, what was I doing? And we worked out when we got back to the hotel that the first thing I did was I looked for these fight starters, and then I would stir them up a bit with some sort of primers that I know from industry. You know, lob out a few of these magic key phrases that people like to use to go and warn each other and see if that explodes it. And as soon as it explodes, I quickly grab the whiteboard marker and start drawing a loop. And it would be an infinite loop because, of course, the moment you give any credibility to one side's argument by documenting it, and of course, writing it down makes it true, right? So you go, oh, okay, so if this happens, if you do that, then this leads to that, then this leads to that, and then, oh my goodness, the goal gets violated. So no wonder you're insisting other side. And then, of course, the other person, you know, can't stand the idea that that's all up on the whiteboard and their side of the story isn't. So then they want to give you their side of the story. So very quickly in that meeting, what you observed was that I was able to just sort of lob hand grenades onto the paddock, let them all go off, watch the fallout, and then document quickly the loops. And then from the loops, you can generate a sense of calm when you point out the commonality between the loops, and when you point out the commonality between the goal violations. And to then have, you know, you notice your audience sort of relax a bit and go, oh, so you do understand us. And then that leads obviously to the, so what's the solution? Who's right and who's wrong? And the answer is, well, neither. You have to build a solution that's a win-win, don't you? So you've got to do it a completely different way, which is how the theory of constraints methodologies work. So for those people in the audience, and I know there's quite a few that come from the TOC community, theory of constraints, if you think about this as, just to dive into jargon for 30 seconds, the 3 UDI cloud method that's quite popular in the community, and the way in which a current reality tree is analyzed using UDI clouds, this is like a supercharged version of that, where I can document maybe 7 of these figure-8 loops from a system, and they are really just deep dives into undesirable effect clouds. And by the time you get to 7, and it normally wouldn't even take 7, the commonality flicks out and you end up hypothesizing a core problem. Very easy to test. You then take that core problem and you drive almost any recurring fight in the business up against that core problem and see if it inflates it. And if it does, within a matter of moments, your audience are all going, oh yeah, that's it. That we're actually defined by that core problem. So now you know what to work on, and it's not all of the Druids.
Yeah.
Right? You down into the core problem, work on that instead. And this, of course, is the breakthrough in the TSC community. The difference is I can produce, in effect, a current reality tree with a high level of audience participation and clarity, and using their language in a matter of really decaminutes, you know, but hours at absolute maximum. But whereas normally that's a huge process. Or you try to do it quickly, but then it's superficial. And as a consultant, you find you're pushing your world perspective into their analysis. Whereas the figure-8 loop method, or the magic Druid method, doesn't require you to contribute any content at all. You can just let the author, you can let the system participants define all the content. So they certainly can't accuse you of, it's very Socratic. They can't after the fact claim that you steered them. There's no steering available. Yeah. So that's how we came up with it. We saw a discrepancy between sort of really fluent use of the diagnostic toolbox and first-timer use of the toolbox, and said, what is the constraint in that process? What is the expert doing that's not that the beginner is not. Furthermore, we discovered that not only is the expert doing something the beginner is not, but that the class did not teach what the expert was doing. It was teaching a different method that once you'd learned that and become incredibly fluent at it, you learn an even faster way. And we concluded that the even faster way was actually the better tool in the first place. So we might as well go straight to it. Now, you and I tested it that very weekend, and we knocked a day off the analysis at first try. Remember, we were going for walks and we came back and went, what the heck just happened? You know, how did these guys get so... We did a walk around the block and came back and they'd knocked up 5 hours work in an hour. Yeah, we were quite shocked. So by Sunday night, we were where we normally would be on a Monday night, and we were able to take that and further compress and accelerate it. So that's how it all came to be.
It did. I'll just add, because I came to those there. What you said about the one-sided loop going up. I remember, so again, we won't name the company, but for context, it was a software company, probably not surprisingly, that we were meeting with in Germany, in Hamburg. And we had in the meeting both people from, I guess you'd call it, the operations side of software, the team leaders and things like that. And we had the commercial side, the more senior managers who were more focused on, I suppose, the commercial outputs. And we just happened to start because I guess we were sort of talking more with the more senior people with the commercial side. And you could see the stress and frustration in the faces of the development side while we were, drawing up what's going wrong with this side of the loop. And they're just itching to get in there. And they were quite sort of frustrated when they had their moment to say, yeah, but they really did, right? It was, yeah, but the other side is this. And they came out with that. And then once both sides were up, both parties, I suppose, were actually, as you said, quite happy. They were like, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, that causes that, and that causes that. Oh, you guys aren't assholes.
Well, a big part, it's a real trap in consulting to suddenly become a referee, I think. Especially, I mean, sure, you can sometimes, but in the case of a system stability, especially in the case where the business is quite successful, the idea that you would suddenly, you as an outsider who just got here 5 minutes ago, would put one set of system needs ahead of another set of system needs, that you would somehow prioritize one goal over another. It always leads to the accusation, well, what would you know? You've only been here 5 minutes. We've been in this for all this amount of time. Whereas when you present back, your system is stable, and this is why. That lands as insight. Now, of course, that leads to the horrific observation that, oh boy, are you screwed. And I used to joke back probably early thousands or late 90s. I had I used to call it the sucks to be you moment. Or a slightly longer version is when the prospect looks at the second floor window lovingly, like they might take a dive out of it, you've got the core problem right. Now, obviously that's flippant, and it's intended to be because it was about teaching my team, please don't go in there like you've got all the answers. Please don't go in there like you're going to solve everything. Please don't go in there like you're somehow gifted and insightful in a way that belies or it makes a lie of their history and their experience. But they know what they're talking about, and their conflicts are real. So real in the sense that they're living them. Now, they may be based on invalid assumptions and all of those things that we hope to address as consultants, but they certainly don't see that. In a sales meeting, it would be very dangerous to claim that someone who's been there 15 minutes knows more about their system than they do, even though in fact you might. and the consultants all look at each other and go, oh, this again, what do we do now? Because you're actually in a weak Druid yourself. Do you reveal that you know exactly what they're talking about and how to solve it, or not? If you do reveal it, they think you're an idiot, escort you off the premises, or shockingly arrogant, in which case, again, escort you off the premises, versus if you do not, they wonder whether you've got any value to add. You know, like, well, why are you here then? You know, if you're just going to tell us we've got a problem, well, we knew that. That's why we told you. So you're in a conflict, you know, yourself. I violate a system need if I tell them they're the same as everyone else and they already know the answer, and I violate a system need if I do not. And in both cases, if you're thinking about it from the point of view of an evaporating cloud conflict diagram, it's the A of the cloud. In this case, would be to presumably get another meeting if this is a sales call. You know, either way, that need gets violated. If you get thrown out for being too arrogant, versus if you get not called back because you appear to be useless. So you've got two competing forces, and your behaviour pair rock in a hard place.
Yep.
Now, what this is, of course, is it's an injection to solve that conflict that says, well, instead of being a smart aleck and thinking I know all the answers, maybe what my job is to define the problem so clearly that that's the insight, is that they can, that there's an acknowledgement that at least the problem is clear, right? The solution's going to take some work, but at least the problem is clear. So that's an example of how you would use you know, how I think in Druids, you know, even when I'm considering my own behavior and considering what I might or might not do, you know, I'm looking at it and going, well, you know, on the one hand, and then on the other hand, and I've got a little Druid conflict going on in my own head. It's a good idea to, you know, you don't want to be dysfunctional or paralyzed by your own observation that you're in a no-win scenario here. You need to get clear so that you can develop a win to that scenario. So,
Sorry, or even the frustrating
a wee bit there, Peter. Carry on. What's next?
Or even that frustrating situation where you feel like you've solved something 10 times over the last 10 years, and yet it just keeps coming back because you haven't got the other side of the loop. So
yes. All right. Okay. Now, did you want to just check in the chat whether there was anything been asked already that you want to?
I'll leave the most of the Q&A if I can till the end. We'll take 15 minutes for that. And
okay.
So if anybody has questions as we go, try and put them in the Q&A section, because I'll pop that up on my screen and I'll just read those out to James at the end.
Okay. Now, somebody's commented that it's hard to visualize because we don't have any pictures on the screen. So could I take a moment to perhaps just help people visualize what this Druid process is?
Yep.
Yeah, so if I'm not sure whether I can hold up a picture, but I know we're going to use the audio, so I'll see if I can describe it verbally first. So imagine if you are you're in a behavioural dilemma in this, and when I say behavioural, I mean, do I do this or do I do that? So it might be as simple as, well, here's one that I had the other day. I bought a business recently that distributes paraffin candles. That's a bit oblique, isn't it? But anyway, I did. And in the discussion with the vendor, the question came up, you know, how do we tell people that the business owner is changing? And straight away, a conflict was entered into between the person that I was appointing to run the business and the vendor. As to, you know, one of them wanted to send an email blast out to everyone on the database announcing the ownership change. The other one wanted to phone everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so imagine you just write those two side by side on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. You go, phone everyone, email blast. Okay, now they're not literally mutually exclusive. I suppose you could do both, but like all businesses, you're in a hurry and you've got a hell of a lot to do, and you've already established, well, I'm not doing both. Okay, so then what you can do, you take the two side by side, these two statements as to an action choice, a conflict that you feel, and you say, okay, if I do the first one, what goal will be violated? What need do I have in the system that will be violated? And what is the mechanism of that violation? And I recommend you get there in two sort of, and then what will happen is type jumps. So you go, well, if we send out an email blast, what I reckon will happen is that people will get the email, they'll open it up and they go, oh, ownership change. And then they will think, well, paraffin, yeah. I wonder who else supplies paraffin. and you trigger a go-to-market event. And then you suddenly find out that you've just had an unacceptable percentage of your customers have now decided to shop around, and you lose them. So you send out this email blast and you lose a bunch of customers. So what you've got, if you imagine a diagram in which you've got the two behaviors side by side, and you go, if I email blast, then people, their attention is drawn to their purchasing of the paraffin. If their attention is drawn to the purchasing of the paraffin, they go to market, they wonder if they can get a cheaper supplier or whatever, and then I lose sales. Okay, so let's now look at my other option, phone everyone. Okay, so if I phone everyone, then my new manager is going to spend all day for several weeks on the phone ringing the whole database, right? Whereas I've got a whole pile of stitching up the suppliers, organizing freight. I got all this, manage the venue, the warehousing of all of this has to happen. And I've got this key person thinking that in order to protect sales, they've got to hit the phones. And I predict an unreasonable increase in risk of several other things going horribly wrong. So in other words, the goal violation there is a smooth transition, and I think the smooth transition will be completely stuffed up by having my man go off and do that. So on the one hand, if you imagine that now it's a figure 8 loop. If I do this behavior, bang, 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 I lose sales. So I want instead to do this other behavior, bang, 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 I have a dreadful transition and it costs me money in other ways. So either way, I'm screwed. Does that make sense? So I've now got this figure 8 infinite loop of I'm in a bind. I'm in a bind either way. So I have to come up with a solution to that. Yeah, someone said you can use the Zoom whiteboard. I think, Peter, a little closer to the end, you've got some pictures, yeah?
Well, I'll send out a template and a couple of examples.
Okay, so
after this, but yeah, I want the audio to be fine as well. So
you want the audio to work. So wherever a picture would be needed, I have to try and replace it. We will send out the picture, but we want people who only listen to the audio to get the picture by description as well. So even if I had a picture, I still feel I need to explain. So if you imagine if just 8 boxes on a piece of paper, and in the bottom 2 boxes, you've 2 rows of 4. Down the bottom, you've got the 2 behaviors. And then just above that, you've got what will go wrong if I do the behaviors, right? Then what will go bad after that leads to what goal violation. And the goal violation goes round in a loop. For God's sake, draw it. Yeah, all right. Oh, okay then. I'll draw a picture. Let me get a... okay. No, I'm going to need a fat marker back in 10 seconds. I don't want to draw on the screen because it'll wobble the camera. All right. So 2 boxes at the bottom, behavior 1, behavior 2. Can you see that, Peter?
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
If I do behavior 1, something goes wrong, something goes bad, and a goal gets violated. So I got goal violation at the top. So I go behavior, something goes wrong, something goes bad, goal violation. Sorry, I drew on top. The goal violation is the driver, the causality of me either doing, in the case of a business that's stable, or wanting to do the alternative behavior in the case of a singular decision. So these, of course, can coexist. You can simultaneously in a business have people doing one behavior and the other behavior, different people, or the same person doing the different behavior at a different time of the month, or as they go around the causal loop. If I do the other behavior, something goes wrong, something goes bad, goal gets violated, which forces me around the traps to want to do the other one again. And I can either go around and around on the singular issue, getting increasingly frustrated with an inability to resolve it and choose, or both sides of it exist simultaneously in a business and remain in place at the same time. And that's the difference between using it in day-to-day fashion and using it for deep causal analysis. For deep causal analysis, these loops coexist and both sides exist at the same time. Hope that helps. You will get the templates.
There will be a template coming out.
Okay.
And a recording.
Right, Peter, did you want another example, or how are we going for time?
Sorry?
Did you want another example, or how are we going for time?
No, I'd like to move on to how do you go away and do this? So with all of these webinars, I'm intending to, I mean, it's a little different with this one. Most of them I won't know the tools, but go away and do it for the next few weeks to learn whatever I'm learning from the expert each month. So what is my first step? You know, I've never done a Druid before. I have no experience with any sort of theory of constraints tools, so we'll assume that. Where do I start? I go and, you know, I'm going to go back to my office today, or, you know, my bedroom to work. Where do I start?
Look, I think I'll give a couple of clues for this one. The key is the yes, but. The yes, but. So when we say, you know, what we need to do is reduce inventory on the factory floor, or what we need to do is, well, you know, send out an email blast, or what we need to do, like that. Somebody's in all you got to do is mode, right? Straight away, you as the audience or somebody else starts to say, oh, hang on, yeah, but, and then they give a counter argument. That's your first clue that there's a Druid running. Now, if it's trivial, they'll just negotiate solution. So much as, again, for the TOC people out there, if you think of the evaporating cloud being used as a device to stimulate a negotiation of solutions, it's exactly the same. In fact, technically speaking, this is a conflict cloud's cross-cloud violation causality. So this is the B and the C and the D and the D prime, and how does D violate C and how does D prime violate B? These are the violation arrows on the diagonal of an evaporating cloud for the technicians out there. Now, but why is it more powerful? You got the same signal as a cloud, the same signal as a conflict, an evaporating conflict. That is to say, yeah, but. And okay, the distinction is that when people tell their story, they are extremely fluent at doing that. So what you observed when I was at that company in Germany is I don't have to teach them clouds. I don't have to teach them about competing forces models. I don't have to teach them about current reality analysis. I don't have to teach them anything, right? I just watch for goal violations. If behavior, then goal violation, get me there. Right? And they don't need any training to get me there. They will explain in great detail. Why? Because it's a stuck record. They've been scrapping about this for a decade. They know the script, right? Yep. And then when you switch to the other side, they know the script too. So they're going to dish it out. So zero training is required. And the difference then is, so you as someone who's using this for the first time, if you find yourself teaching the tool, you're doing it wrong. If you find yourself explaining figure eights, you're doing it wrong. You don't need to do that. Listen for the yes, but. You put the behavior, right, okay, guys, let's just do this behavior that you've given me. Just do the thing. What'll happen? What'll go wrong? See, when you think about competing forces models, you ask a different question. It's like, why are you doing that? You see, what are you protecting? Right? Yep. The problem is that what are you protecting? You could be protecting a whole bunch of things. So then there's the sort of random trial and error crapshoot where you're trying to filter from all of that. No, instead, take the opposite side and ask them to explain what's violated. And without any training, they can get there almost immediately. They know exactly what's wrong. So they will tell you. So that's what my recommendation is. How should you use it in the listening? Is you stimulate by bouncing back and forward between the two goal violations and using the violation of this goal to say, oh, so that's why you want to do this behavior. Well, that makes sense. And so why don't you do that all the time? And of course you get the, oh, well, see, the trouble with that is, and then you get the other story. Oh, and then that gets filed. So no wonder you can't do that all the time. Yeah, right. So that's why you want this That's why you want B2, isn't it? So why don't you just do B2 all the time? And then you get and after, particularly if they can go around the story 3 times. So we do a thing in the business at WiseTech where you can actually use this as a role-playing teaching device. We might get 2 core managers, 2 senior people on a call with a particular target audience of supervisors or managers who are looking for, some insight into how to solve some problem, and then say, well, here's an argument. And one of the managers takes one side of the Druid, and the other manager takes the other side, and they actually go around and they up the stakes and escalate the argument to almost to the point of parody where it gets ridiculous. And of course, the audience thinks this is hilarious because what they're seeing is 2 senior people who are acting out the same conflict they're in, right? And not taking sides and acknowledging that, hey, this is real. Like, we actually have an unresolvable figure 8 here. Like, we don't know what to do, which opens the door. This is about the layers of resistance, opens the door to the idea that you are stuck. As long if we all acknowledge that you're stuck and trying to not pretend that you're not stuck, let's acknowledge that you're stuck. Now, let me show you how we unstick you. And that's the bite. So I use it by listening for yes, but. I listen for goal violations. I listen for all you got to do is type language, right? And I don't fight it. I just acknowledge it and look for how justify the position. Don't refute it. Don't take the counter arguments. Document both arguments. That's how you do it. So the no fail first step, as it were, is to just open your ears for the goal violations, those diagonals, those. If we should do this thing, that's true, probably should. But if we do, there's this other side, this counterpoint. Get the counterpoints out and don't take sides. That's the first thing. That's probably close enough to. And now, if you use the template, it helps because it lets people tell their story. And also it's just enough content. Like, we only make it 4 boxes. Now, could it be 3 or could it on each side? I mean, 4 on each side. I didn't pick that by accident, this 2x4 structure. Why 4? Well, you need just enough space to tell your story, right? But not so much space that you sort of descend into generic hyperbole, right? Where you're blowing it out of all proportion. If I don't put a stamp on every envelope, mate, sales are going to halve next year. That sort of, yeah. I mean, probably that causality, that's a bit dodgy. Let's just get to the little goal violation that's actually upsetting you and not take it off into horror stories. So you don't want too much detail in the first quick lap of a Druid. You want just enough. On the other hand, if it's too short, people feel they weren't listened to. And we've found from experience that 2 lots of 4. Some people want to write an extra box, let them. Some people want to skip a box, let them. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So I'm sitting down to use this first time. Let's say I'm not quite comfortable enough to jump into it with somebody else. One option obviously would be to sit in quietly on a Zoom call with myself on, video off and just draw this out on my laptop or something. But let's say I wasn't even going to do that. How do I start with a couple of these just to get, to get in the rhythm of it before I try and use it with anybody else?
Oh, I would pick something that's going on for you right now, like that moment where you read an email and you go, oh, rather than I know the answer and just supply it, when you sort of go, oh, and your hesitation doesn't come from not knowing, it comes from knowing that if you say D and they do D, there's going to be a stuff up. On the other hand, if you say the opposite, that moment where you're conflicted, like you can see both points of view. That's the crack at it practice on. You did a great one in the car once. We were driving along, Peter, and you shouted something from the back seat. You said, like, it's all clouds. I was like, what? And you said, Well, if you change lanes now, you'll get to the lights sooner, but you might end up in the wrong lane and get stuck going the long way around the airport. Do you remember that?
That's right. Yeah, it was that's what our driver was literally muttering about doing as he was coming up to the
like,
Sydney
do I
airport.
change lanes or not? Now it's not that, I mean, it's trivial, but it tunes you in to the way your brain processes the information. If I change lanes now, it comes with a risk. If I don't change lanes now, it comes with a risk, like it's going to take longer or we might be late to our meeting or whatever. So just seeing, just getting present to the dilemma you're in, which is of course exactly the same as using the clouds tool again for the TOC people in the audience. There is a tool for this. This is just sort of like clouds on steroids with no training required. I think when I presented at the TOC ICO conference and Alan Barnard said, well, it's clouds, isn't it? I said, well, of course it is. Well, yeah, of course it's clouds. That's not really my point. My point is I can show people this tool and within 20 minutes it's going viral through their, their business colleagues, right? I show them the cloud and they go, oh, okay. And then they want to go and practice it. And then they find it's a little harder than they thought and nothing happens. And so you've got to run training courses and stuff. We hardly ever have to run a training course in the Druids. You show them two and suddenly the thing's going viral. To me, as a contributor to business change, a tool that is intuitively obvious and goes viral, but has exactly the same input driver and output driver as another tool, is a tool that removes the constraint of the previous tool. Now converting the figure 8 loop back into a cloud's a piece of cake, because you got the 2 goal violations at the top and you got the 2 wants at the bottom. So, anyone who's very comfortable with clouds can flick back and forth between the two. And in fact, some of our documentation, we've actually automated that. If you draw one, you get the cloud for free in a different sheet of Excel. And if you draw the cloud, you get your Druid drafted for you in the other cell of an Excel spreadsheet. So they are, in fact, the same tool. You're looking at the same house through a different window, I guess. The advantage, and the clear advantage to me when I'm involved in business change, is that on the one hand, you need a fair amount of experience and fluency to use clouds well. You don't need any to use Druids well. That's the plus. So it goes boom, all by itself and you don't have to do much training.
All right, good. So just to come back to one of the points you said about an email, say one of the best ways you could start there is if you can find an email chain that you might have seen where you've got a couple of people going backwards and forwards on an argument. If you've got one of those in your inbox anywhere from the last few weeks, that's a good place to start, because you'll probably have basically everything for each side of the Druid from the 2 people arguing backwards and forwards, or at least you can fill in the gaps, I'm sure yourself, if you know.
Oh, especially if you're late, if you're in the, as often happens with me, is the dialogue's been going on for 7 or 8 emails, and then I'm being copied in to some management ruling. What we need is someone with some what do you call it, clout and the guts to make a decision on this, and then you read the trail and go, what, guts to make a decision? What you mean is guts to goal violate. You want me to acknowledge a goal violation so you guys don't have to figure out how to build a win-win. We'll stuff that. Like if there's a win-win in there, I want it. So I'm not making a ruling between 2 points of view and just sacrificing a commercial goal in favor, because what happens next time it comes up and they copy that. Right. So this is very, very common from a management standpoint, is you get told to adjudicate between 2 points of view that are both a lose for the enterprise. So it's pretty easy if you're a manager to go digging through your inbox and looking for these trails. The thing where you've been added in after considerable back and forth, usually that's easy cannon fodder for go find the Druid. Another thing I've done to get my eye in is listen to, like when attend a meeting and say nothing, but note down behavior pairs and goal violation pairs. Just listen for it. and then listen to the arguments that are being used to validate the goal violation. Like my goal, sales targets is more important than your goal, cash preservation.
Yep.
Right. So you're listening in for that. And when you can hear that, you can start to note that down. So that's a good way that we train the managers at WiseTech with it, is just give them the template that you're going to send to the team. And do you have a pad there with a Druid on it?
Do I have what, sorry?
The pad, the pre-printed pad.
Oh, I don't have one in front of me, no. But what I'll send out will be a PowerPoint. So
you
can fill in the boxes, yada, yada, yada.
I just hand a pad of them with a template on it to somebody and say, look, just go to a meeting and come out with 5 of them. And I'll tell you, it's a 40-minute meeting. They'll come out with 5 Druids, easy. Because this is what meetings are. It's people presenting two sides of people presenting a side of an argument, having a debate about it, and then trying to make a decision.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So no fail first step really is take the template into a meeting with you and just listen, turn your ears on. You'll see them there. They're everywhere.
Easier than ever with working from home. People don't even have to see you doing it.
Nearly every Zoom call I have ends with a Druid, actually.
There you go. Well, people are blowing up a bit about answering some questions here. So now
I see that. Maybe it's time. All right.
Now that we've got the last 15 minutes, I'll get into it. So put your questions, as I said earlier, in the Q&A section, and I'll go through them here. There's some half questions here. If you put your question and try and fill out the whole thing rather than in 2 or 3 parts, because there's a lot coming in, so I've got to be able to try and read one off.
So, Peter, is this the dialog box that pops up that says open 9, answered and dismissed? Can I just scroll that and just give quick reactions to some of these?
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
All right. So Richard Zoltan has said, what's the difference between a conflict and a decision? I think you can. Probably for me, it's the distinction between sort of trying to optimize the utility of a choice. Do I want to go to the movies and eat popcorn and then just get a snack on the way home, or do I want to go out to dinner? Well, what you're doing there is you're sort of trying to maximize utility. The goal, there isn't a different goal between those two. So to me, it's a conflict when there's a goal violation. In the case of I want to go to the movies versus I want to go to dinner, if there's no goal violation, if I'm happy either way, I'm just trying to maximize utility, right? So if I'm trying to maximize utility, that's different. At the end of the day, what happens if you get it wrong? Nothing. You're just not quite as happy as you might have been. So it's a big deal. Whereas when there's a goal violation present, you know that the benefits you gain on one side of the decision come at a price. As soon as there's a price to be paid, okay, now you're in a conflict, because now you feel that, whereas I don't feel particularly conflicted. If you say to me, would you like me, I got 2 envelopes, one's got $100 and one's got $200, which one do you want to pick? I'm just going to grab one. Like, I'll just look at that and go, well, there's no way to choose, I'll take that one. And then I'll be happy because I'm $100 better off or $200 better off. I'm not going to bemoan the fact that my utility was lower because I made the wrong decision. Right. On the other hand, if you say, well, there's 2 envelopes in here and each one's got a penalty and a prize, ooh, okay, now I got to weigh up the penalties, right? And my first thought would be, how do I get the prizes without the penalties? That's really the key issue when you're trying to solve conflict. Is what I want all the benefit of the choices without any of the penalties of the choices, and that's the thing about trying to drag a solution out of it. The solution is not to choose, it's to come up with option 3 that doesn't have any of the side effects. That would be better. Okay, clouds have broad applications and can be used for trivial as well. Correct. Does Druid Loop have the same? Yes. The answer is yes, absolutely. What are the steps? I think we sort of covered that. I did end up drawing a picture of the steps that normally it kicks off with it's the yes but is the thing that triggers for me. So people say, oh, what we should do is this, and I'm sort of like, oh yeah, whatever. But as soon as somebody yes buts and starts giving you those goal violations or those ouchies, you then, hang on, everyone, slow down. So what you're saying is, if we do this thing, then this happens, and then it goes, and then I've got a goal violation. Let me get that clear. That's really the trigger in the step process. And as soon as that happens, you then just need to get the other side. That goal violation is the driver for the alternative suggestion. Now, of course, are there only ever two suggestions? No, but what happens is people go to war on each other because they get entrenched in the two positions. And so their mental bandwidth for entertaining option 3 or 7, has been reduced to a fight about the two options that came out first. And then they start trying to satisfy us. Okay. Does the system purpose come into play, says Gordon? Yes, normally, if I'm mentally flipping between the two diagram styles, where in the one hand I'm saying there's a system goal, a larger system purpose, which has two necessary conditions. And those necessary conditions are the ones being violated in the decision process. Then the system goal, the goal of that, the common goal of the two is relevant. What happens when you draw the figure 8 loop, this is something you can watch for as a facilitator, is that both parties actually get to the same goal violation. If that's true, that's actually the deeper system driver, the system or the purpose of the system that they both share. And so you come back one from that because they're not in dispute about that. Okay. System purposes, Gordon, I may or may not have cleared that up because I'm not sure of the background of whether that's coming from the TOC definition or some other definition of purpose, but system purposes as opposed to goal violations, whether you're working on maximizing a utility function or whether you're trying to minimize damage, these are different. So system purposes tend to revolve around utility function. That's more likely what the A of the cloud, if you're thinking in TOC terms, rather than the B and the C, or the system goal. I use those almost with a Druid. I think of that as context. That's where you say, hang on guys, at the end of the day, we're all here to save lives, or at the end of the day, we're all here to get our passengers from A to B without crashing the plane. Or if all, when all's said and done, we have a purpose for being here. Let's not forget that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's how I would bring the system purpose into play, is to stop the bickering quality of it. It's like, hang on, we're all on the same page here, right? So that's the context within which the loop is being drawn. That's the system purpose context. I would normally, I'd say 70% of the time you can assume it because they know, and they will say that. People will say, well, at the end of the day, we're all here for blah. So I think that answers that one. If not, just ask another question. How do we resolve after we draw the diagram? Do we do it by? Yeah, look, Rodney, if you've got any skill with the TOC tools and you know how to put the two behaviors into the DD prime of a cloud and the two system goal violations into the B and C of a cloud, draw a cloud, raise assumptions and injections, that process, that's fine. That's what I would do. If you don't know that, if you're new, and if you don't want to run training courses, as I've described, I think of it more as, can anybody brainstorm a way to, so you take your diagram and flip the negativity of the statement. So if it says something like, what was that one I said before about, as an email blast, and people open the email and they're triggered to go to market. Okay, is there any way we can send that email and not trigger that? What does not triggering it look like? And somebody might say, well, what if it, instead of triggering go to market event, it triggered a response, or it triggered a click through, or it triggered a expression of interest? Yeah, okay, all right, so let's work our way around. So if it did, instead of what you gave me, it triggered an expression of interest, then how does that fix it? And you can follow it all the way around. You sort of get back and go, the whole thing will be solved. Great. So now we've got an option 3 now that doesn't seem to suffer from this. Now, of course, somebody might say, oh yeah, but the trouble with that option, they're in a new one. But that's again, from a TOC perspective, that's basically the negative branch of an injection resolve an assumption of a conflict. It's the same process, but you, again, no training required. You can just ask for sort of a brainstorming of input, and you use this as like a test first document, right? All injections must pass the test. That is to say, they must alter the causality of this loop. If they do not, then they're not a solution. And shouting about it's not going to help you, right? Throwing more evidence at me that your idea is a good one isn't going to help you. It either fixes the loop or it doesn't. So let's here it is. We can go around the loop and check it, right? So you stick your idea here and see what happens when we go around the loop with it, see if it resolves it. So you use it as a test first framework effect. So the answer to the question is absolutely. If you're fluent with the TOC tool, use that. If you're not, instead use this as like a test first to test brainstorming of ideas. That's it.
James, we've got 5 minutes here. So what I'll do is, if you have time to hang around and answer a few more, I'll formally wrap up the webinar for those who need to get somewhere else, who don't want to formally run overtime. However, we can also have a meeting after the meeting to answer the rest of the questions if you're around.
Yeah, I can stay on another 10, 15 minutes, no problem. So anyone who wants to hang around, stick around. Yep.
All right. So for anybody who needs to leave, thanks for attending. I really appreciate it. We're going to have basically another one of these each month with a different expert this each time and a different concept or skill being discussed. You will get that email out, as many of you asked, with templates and examples in that, as well as the recording of this, which you can obviously watch as much as you like and share wherever you'd like to share. So that'll all be coming out possibly this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So look out for that in your inbox.
And that'll have some examples.
Thanks for attending, and I'll let James get back to the questions.
So Peter, you're going to send some examples as well.
Yep.
We've got hundreds. So I mean, this is a day-to-day tool. We got hundreds. So there's no shortage of examples we can supply people if they want to see how it works. Okay. Can we work through? Sorry, I've scrolled. What do you ask to get the boxes? Was Rodney's question, and a real example. I did go through a real example, so I'm not sure if that was asked before, but let me go through another one just quickly for you. So we had a question from our project management people about due dates, and should I or should I not be putting due dates on projects? And that seems like a fairly legit question from a project management standpoint. And of course, as always with these things, my answer is depends. What are you talking about here? I'm not going to be tricked and trapped into that one because there's a Druid here. So I would say, all right, look, the fact that you've asked me suggests you're conflicted. If you weren't conflicted, you wouldn't have asked. So if you put due dates on things, what happens? Tell me what happens. What goes wrong? And so now somebody's also said, so I'll answer that at the same time. What's the difference between goes wrong and goes bad? When you say to somebody, if you do that, what goes bad? It's a harsh step because it sounds like it requires an accusation or some kind of, let me stick a pin in somebody. If I say what goes wrong, it's sort of like what is an inevitable, not too nasty sort of drift in the direction of wrongness, which doesn't sound as brutal as what goes bad. So you can pick your own words depending on your language locality. But for me, I find if I say, well, if you do that, what goes wrong? And so what the person says is, well, if we put due dates on everything, what goes wrong is within a week, there's an argument about the priority of those dates. Because some of the dates have serious commercial consequences if they're violated, and some of them don't. Okay, and then what goes bad? We go, well, I don't know, we just reprioritize everything. No. Something goes bad that leads to you experiencing a goal violation. You are in pain. When are you in pain? Get me to your pain. You put a date on it, you end up in pain. And you said what goes wrong is there's resequencing dialogues. So what goes bad? Well, all right, so I put a date on it, I say end of June, and then there's 35 of these things active because I'm a project manager to the project manager, so there's a lot of these things going on, and I find that we quite perfectly, reasonably, legitimately change the dates on some things, and then all hell breaks loose. And the poor old project manager who's had his due date changed because of organisation-wide priority setting. And let's not forget the date was made up in the first place. So there should not be any commercial reason to stick to that date, right? Other than the fact that it was used as a priority indicator. Now what happens is that project manager is accused of being incompetent. Well, that's a goal violation for him or her. Okay, so if we put dates on everything, project managers are accused of being incompetent. Yeah, right. Okay, that sounds like crap. Okay, let's not put dates on anything. Oh, that won't work. Have you tried it? Yeah, we've tried to not do that. We try only putting dates on things that actually have dates, like actually have damage if we miss them. Then what happens? Well, then what happens is that the things with dates on them muscle out the things that don't have dates on them. And the undated ones go on the never, never list and never get done. Because when you've got a choice as to whether you deploy resources to speed up this project or that project this week, of course, you choose the one with the date on it, don't you? Right. So then what happened? Well, then, we couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery because we can't finish anything. Oh, okay. So you're either incompetent because you can't hit dates, or you're incompetent because you can't start projects, or your project's all stalled. Yeah. Okay. So it sucks to be you. You're screwed. And of course, that's why I came. But James, that's why I came to you. Aha. Okay. So your problem is you're trying to choose between dating things and not dating things. And at WiseTech, we happen to have a complete toolbox we call low due date environment. Here's a pile of content. Go read that about how to run in a low due date environment and how to reconcile the scheduling problem. Now, I won't go into all the solution here because that's not the purpose of the session. Suffice to say that, of course, then the person in that position is now highly motivated to read that content, right? They want this Druid solved. So that's an example. That's how to walk through it. That's the difference between goes wrong and goes bad. That's how you get the story going to a rock and a hard place. And sucks to be you, you're screwed either way. That's the thing, right? And then you don't take sides. You have a solution to the problem. Maybe you have to invent a solution. Maybe you already have one. It doesn't really matter. In this case, we already had one because this is hardly a new conversation. Okay, let's go. Next one. Goal violation, wrong and bad outcomes I've covered. After the 8 box, we have talked about that. So John, if you're not sure if that's been answered, just maybe clarify your question a little. When anonymous attendee says, when completing a CRT, the 3x method helps you determine what the core conflict is, correct? For the Druid method, how do you know? Well, what's interesting in the Druid cloud method, the way it was originally taught to me, was that you do 3 and then you go back and look at the undesirable effect list and say, is this cloud, this merge of the 3, is this somehow, can you see the causality connection between that and all of them? And if not, do a 4th, and if not, do a 5th. And what we learned from you almost never get to 5. What we learned from that is that the goal violations coalesce very quickly. Now, we used to struggle until there was a lot of practice. At 3OD Cloud gets me to these 3 clouds. I'm going to try and merge them. And suddenly there's all this creativity goes into merging the B's and the C's, and all of this sort of, I'm a wise consultant with all this wisdom from outside the business, so let me tell you what your B and C are. And the customer, this can work brilliantly, don't get me wrong, but sometimes the customer has a sensation of, well, it's all very well, but how the hell did you get there? The difference with Druids is that after they've drawn, say, 5 to 7 of them, they say to you, hey, it's the same pair at the top every time. So what's happening is this process of the merge process, the organizational merge process that you use in the 3UD Cloud method, again, without any fancy training and almost no practice, a novice can document these Druids, and by the time they get to the 7th one, they're seeing the pattern. So of course it has a lot more clout because they're now telling you the pattern, and you can just do a quick sketch of the core problem based on what they said and say, well, it sounds like this is your core problem. Does that bite with you? And if they read it and go, ow, yeah, okay, well, maybe that's the core problem then, and then you can start testing it against other Druids. And what normally happens is they come back and go, man, that just about covers every business meeting I've had for the last 50 days. Then they want to frame it. We've actually come back and found people have framed their core problem, which they got to not by doing a CRT, not by doing a 3D cloud process. They literally got there by writing 7 Druids and themselves telling you what the core problem is. Then all you did is document it and hand it back to them. They put it on the wall, frame it, and go that every meeting, if it ends up in this one, we need to talk. We need a big solution to that. This is not day-to-day trivia anymore. This is a core problem. Okay, hopefully that answers that one. What if they come up with 3 to 5? Brilliant. I have no problem with people coming up with which would be common. Weirdly, as soon as you get people off scrapping over the 2 sides of the Druid, as soon as a palatable alternative comes in that doesn't really have major negative side effects, you find that both sides are right into it. And so it probably isn't the first idea that comes out, but the second or third is generally more than that's enough. Now, of course, if it's a core problem, or whether it's a core problem to a business area or to the entire business system, that's going to require a little more work. That's why we have the more advanced tool sets. But for most conflicts that are handled this way, as soon as it's clearly articulated, the solution is often obvious. That's the freaky bit. It's like everyone looks at it and then someone goes, well, why don't we just do this then? And the whole room's like, oh yeah, duh. like it's that quick. So it was never that the problem was truly unsolvable. It was just that people were stuck in a rut, so they couldn't see the wood for the trees kind of thing. They were stuck on their point. As soon as you unstick them, they quite quickly, yeah. So hopefully that answers John's question. Brendan, do you catch yourself identifying a system constraint you weren't previously aware of? Yes. It's very tempting as an outsider to listen to a problem set and then think you've got the answer. And of course, you're probably satisfied because you're listening for what you recognize. It's occurred to me that's very dangerous. I mean, I do know a lot of different system models and I do see a lot of patterns, but it's incredibly risky for me to project that onto a client or onto someone else's life. I find that almost offensive. I would much rather allow myself to discover something through the Druid process that I was not aware of. So I do not rush this. I calmly let it all play out, and I'm absolutely up for discovery. I'm not hunting for a new constraint. I'm just let it happen. Yeah, it's a real trap to think everybody's the same as everybody else. And in fact, that's one of the Druids of consulting. And when I started working with the guys in the UK, the Goldratt UK guys have been really fantastic with this stuff. A great deal of respect for the fact that they had the very same view. It was like, oh, you don't really want to go in and start cookie cuttering people. It's not fair. So yes, is the answer, Brandon. I do. Christopher, would you be able to open would you be open to the technique being added to the process? Oh my goodness. Sure. Happy to help. That's a yes. I would be open to that. Yeah. I think if
I'll just jump in there, James. I'm not here on these webinars to promote the Black Belt in Thinking as the training course. However, if you're interested in more extensive training, clearly that's the place to get it.
Well, look, I mean, WiseTech's one of the biggest buyers of Black Belt Thinking tickets on the planet, and continue to do so. And there's a very good reason for that. I mean, we have people in-house who could run the courses, but the having the course run properly by professionals whose job it is to deliver those outcomes to us is better than having internal people with their own internal agendas. You know, like imagine you're trying to teach Druids, but the topic that comes out is one that you have a functional area accountability towards. Trying to do that with no bias in your hat's pretty hard. It's much better to say to Viago, look, just I don't want to know, just get them documenting their stuff and get them fixing it all. You don't want to bring your own bias into it. So, yep, I'd be happy for Takiko processes to use it. I'd be even happier if Viago were involved in that. That'd be great. How do you know the loop's fixed? I talked before, Kira, about using it as a bit of a test first document. That's generally how you know. I mean, fixed is difficult. What does fixed looks like? Fixed looks like the participants are no longer warring. Fixed looks like you and I look at the option in front of us and go, so are we willing to work on this? And if the answer is yes, we are both willing to work on this same statement, bring this done statement, this expression of doneness into being. As soon as we are collaborating cooperative, the loop is fixed. Does your solution work? Okay, there's other tools for that. You know, obviously you've got to prerequisite analysis, or you've got to plan, you've got the necessary conditions and all of that. Fine. But at the end of the day, collaboration's the game here. The inability to act because we can't choose to act together is the destructor here. So there's sort of two phases of solved. Phase one is we're actually working together on the problem and we believe in the same done statement. Then there's actually solving it, which requires a little bit more than just the Druid. Go on, Peter, you wanted to add something?
No. Just
sorry, it popped up and said Peter wants to answer this question live, so you might have clicked.
Oh no, I'm just doing that to clear them off the list as you answer them.
Oh, okay. Could I look at the camera instead of the screen? Sorry. Where's my camera? Is that better? Is I looking off screen slightly? How to unearth undeclared agendas? Ooh, well, I've got a couple of ways to do that. The main problem with this actually is an issue with the cloud method, I think, because when people smoke screen the B and C of the cloud, again, if you're not from the TOC world, don't worry about it. I'll connect the dots in a second. But if you're used to using the cloud and people are lobbing in these smoke screen system needs to try and drive up their point of view by making it seem like the world will end if they don't get their thing, whereas actually their need is undisclosed. The thing about the Druid is that it's very hard to draw a causal link in only 4 boxes to the world ending with some sort of hyperbole of a system goal violation that's so dreadful that you can compel the other side to comply. It's very difficult to do in only 4 boxes. You sound like an idiot if you try. So I've noticed that when people use this tool, they might open with a claim that the world will end, sales will halve if we put prices up, this sort of thing. And then when you say, okay, well, let's just write that down, like we'll work it through. And if there's that, so what goes wrong, what goes bad, and how does the goal get violated? You end up with that. You can sort of stare at the outcome and go, really? And of course, they've written it and they know what they've written is rubbish. It's sort of like, well, yeah, all right. Well, that's not really what's bothering me. Okay, well, then what is bothering you? If they don't want to disclose in front of the other party, I would split them. Take it offline and do it separately, and then get them to clean it so that it's okay to present, and then bring them back together. It's hard to an undeclared agenda versus an agenda you wish to remain undeclared are different questions, obviously. So in this case, if it's simply undeclared, the way that you get it to be declared is to draw the branch to the one they did say, and then sort of wait. It's generally pretty obvious. If they want to keep it hidden, again, that's clear because the it's clear that they're not being fully disclosing. So you've got to provide a safe space for that. Take it offline, maybe get someone who's not, like sometimes I am on one side of the conflict, in which case I'll get a neutral party and say, look, can you please figure out the Druid here and then clean it for consumption by both sides and then bring it in. But it needs to be true. You know, we can't be solving things that don't exist. So that's a couple of ways to address that. There's a subtlety of what goes wrong and goes bad and not getting. Possibly the two words are synonymous. Oh, it's only a psychological device of using the word wrong versus the word bad. It's nothing to do with the words having a different meaning, you know, in the dictionary or anything. When I say to somebody, it goes bad, it sounds like a value judgment. This might be a New Zealand thing. Maybe you need different words. If you say it's going wrong, it's like, let's say I'm carrying a tray of cocktails, you know, and I trip and everything wobbles and then I recover. Well, certainly it was going wrong, but it didn't go bad yet. It goes bad when I trip over and the whole lot goes to the floor. That's the going bad bit. So it's a matter of magnitude. Wrong is like it's a little bit wobbly. It's not bad yet, but you can see that it's maybe wrong is to do with the risk going up. Think of it that way. Wrong is when suddenly the risk in what you're doing has risen. It hasn't gone bad yet. Capturing that as distinct from it then going bad. And one of the reasons for that is it often gets risky. It only sometimes goes bad. So that's another difference. If you ask people to jump straight to bad, you then get into arguments about the magnitude of the bad, and you get into arguments about the frequency with which it goes bad. Whereas we can all agree that 70% of the time, if you trip while carrying a tray of cocktails, that's risky. Like we agree with that, and there's no value judgment in that. You drop the tray all the time. Okay, now you're calling me incompetent. You know, I've dropped the tray twice ever. Yeah, but you keep tripping over. Sure, but I don't drop the tray. So now we're getting into this magnitude argument, and I'm discounting the branch by disputing that you're accusing me of being bad. I'm having a DRP, a directly responsible person reaction rather than reactive. Whereas if you say, well, you trip all the time, that puts the risk up, doesn't it? So that's a bit dodge. How often do you actually trip over? Oh, only a couple of times. Well, all right. You know, there's a difference in the accusation level. Hopefully that helps. I don't think these are super hard and fast rules. They're just devices to get the conversation to go round the loop without it getting bound up by people going on the defensive. If you can think of a better way of doing that in your context, that's fine. All right, the flow of questions. I've done a couple of laps now of examples. Have I? Further on flow of arrows, goal violation. Yes, correct. So your top left goes down to the bottom right. It's a feedback loop. And your top right comes back to the bottom left in a feedback loop. That's how you get the sort of infinity symbol of it. So you go from B1 up to goal violation 1, which feeds back to the opposite side B2, which goes up to goal violation 2, which comes back to the opposite side B1 again. Oh, good. Now the questions are that we're answering the questions well. That's nice. Vicky. Hi, Vicky. It's been a while. Can you talk about how we manage tensions in a positive way? Cost versus quality, fast versus slow. Positive way. Well, I think by acknowledging that people are trying to protect system goals, it takes a lot of steam out of stuff. You know, when you watch people defending the other party's idiocy for violating the system need they're protecting, it's quite nasty. Whereas with the cloud's done right, cloud's done calmly, which is tricky, versus Druid's done right. And it's only a speed factor. I could certainly get there using conflict diagrams, but with the Druid, as I say, no training, so it's quick. You're just acknowledging it. You're saying, well, okay, that's That's a bummer. You know, it's not like you're an idiot because you're goal violating. You know, why would you do such a stupid thing, you moron, is often the implication when managers go to war on each other about how stupid this other idea is. You're the oil on the troubled waters with that, is to say, well, no, hang on, this is a perfectly reasonable argument. We don't want that outcome, do we? We don't want that outcome either, do we? I'm not telling you that I'm going to choose one over the other. I want to choose both good outcomes. I want to dampen both negative effects. So it's win-win or no deal. This has a very calming effect. So this is the ongoing tension in a positive way. That's how I do it. I point out that we're here to work together to reduce the negative effect on both sides. I'm not going to take sides. I want a win-win. Now, you know, occasionally people have said, oh, you know, you're a manager, just make a decision. And I have a standard answer to that. Are you sure? Because don't you think I'm afraid of making a decision? I'll make a decision, all right. What if I decide against you? There's a druid there, because then what you can do is say, oh, it's his fault, he made a decision. Well, there's such a thing as loyal opposition. If you ask me to make a decision and I make one, you then have to make it work. That's your role in the process. So you can either use my expertise, intelligence, and wisdom to help find another way, or you can live with my decision and then make that work. But I will still be holding you accountable for the outcomes. And then, of course, people go, no, on second thoughts, I prefer the first option. Let's work together on it. Because they're all smart people, you know, like they don't want to be dictated to. You know, there's a company full of, it's like the Big Bang Theory where I work, they're all geniuses. They don't like being dictated to. So, okay. John, please verbalise how this works. Sorry, might have lost the context of that one.
I think that was regarding, he's got a follow-up question below, which I think covers it in more
with
detail.
the arrows?
Yeah.
What's the time? 21? Have I answered that? What? Not getting what happens when the arrow goes back. Oh, and what? Oh, I see. Okay. So when you get to a goal violation, like let's say in my case with the email blast, we get a go-to-market event, and what happens is the top line drops. So what you're doing is you're tying this sort of catastrophic maybe back to legitimizing the fear of the suggestion and then legitimizing the assertion on the other side. So it's not that the goal violation occurs and causes the other behavior, it's that the fear of the goal violation or its actual occurrence motivates the other behavior, and a natural human response is to protect the system with that other behavior. So I'm asking questions like, well, first of all, I'd say, so is that so the fear of that or that actually happening is why you're suggesting this alternative, is that right? And then they can say yes and explain why their alternative fixes the other side, the side they don't agree with. And just let them, and then I can acknowledge that and say, well, I can't get it. That's a good reason. That goal violation or threat of is a good reason why you're suggesting this. Okay, so, but then what if we do this? So we're not, hopefully that helps. So the feedback loop is about legitimizing the intention of the person providing the action as legitimate, fair, and good. You know, they're not an idiot. They're making a good, solid suggestion for how to improve the system. Okay. Wrong versus bad, says Ben. Is it personal? Yeah, probably. I don't, again, I'm not, as I said before, not labouring dictionary definitions of wrong versus bad. This is only about letting people tell their story and letting so as the magnitude of the catastrophe escalates, the probability of the catastrophe tends to crash. So the wrong bad thing is just about saying, when we do this, nearly always this little niggly occurs. Sometimes that escalates and sometimes that escalates, but not always. So it's about the progression, the transition of a probable negative effect that may or may not ripple effect versus the improbable but unacceptable negative effect of it going too far. So that's So yes, it is a matter of perspective. I think in some druids, the journey up that chain is the trivial links. Sometimes we draw them and you could just about go straight to the end one because the goal violation is not that serious. But in cases where the goal violation is quite serious, then you need a little bit more. And then John says, and then you go where to keep figure eighting, is it? Infinity.
I suspect the example, like the examples and templates are going to help a lot here, John.
Yeah, look, John, I think when we send out, if Peter sends you, a couple of dozen actual Druid loops, and we've got plenty, so I don't think that'll be a big issue. And there may be, if you want to send out some of our ones, Peter, just like I'm okay with that, but just check with me and I'll make sure they're, somebody from WiseText looked at them. From
we've got
sanitizing them, don't want to be dobbing a customer or something. But yes, I mean, these are very generic loops. So yes, John, but it's symmetrical. So if you've got a goal violation legitimizing the action on the other side, and similarly you end up at a goal violation legitimizing the action on the other side, it doesn't matter which side you start on. You could flip the diagram. You treat them as it's just a total mirror image. All right. Okay, well, I think you had your scheduled time went pretty well, Peter, and now we've answered all the. Oh my goodness, no open questions.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Well,
I guess that's
you're free to leave when you like, and I'll turn my video and things off. I'll just go through and screenshot these questions and things so that we can put them over top of the video recording. So it pops up when you answer each question, sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, and there may be some graphics you can add on to the video later if people want to come back and watch it again, and you've actually got a Druid or two that you can, if people want to watch it again and they see the images. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Be great. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. And thanks for the really good questions. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Cheers. Hope to see you at the next one.
Bye.